I want to begin by apologizing for asking you to watch and listen to Elon Musk in this video. I promise it will only be brief, and it's all going somewhere. First up, a little over a month ago, Elon Musk was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast, and among many other things, he said this.
The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response.
That is certainly a take. The fundamental weakness of Western civilization, according to Elon Musk, is empathy, not wealth inequality. Not that I would ever expect Elon to say that. Not short-sighted lack of preparedness for looming environmental disasters, not weakening public institutions, not the rise of authoritarianism, not growing apathy among the public for participation in politics and in government and in public life, not the undealt with remnants of imperialism and colonialism that are still with us to this day around the world. No, none of those things. Empathy. And he also says that empathy is a bug in Western civilization. Now, plenty of us could probably argue convincingly that it certainly has not been a feature of Western civilization. But to call it a bug, to call empathy a bug of our society, of our civilization, I say again, that is certainly a take. But elsewhere in that conversation with Rogan, Elon also says he thinks empathy is important. He says you should care about other people. It's just apparently, with Elon, it really makes a difference which other people you care about. That subject of empathy in that conversation came up as Elon was responding to a proposal in California to extend medical coverage to undocumented people who meet certain guidelines. That's what provoked Elon to say that empathy is the greatest weakness, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization. The prospect of undocumented people in California receiving medical coverage. So obviously they're not the people we should care about, not the undocumented people. In fact, not the less fortunate in general, seemingly, nor, if we go by Elon's recent activities involving the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, government workers. We shouldn't care about them because they can be fired, and that's actually a cause for celebration if you're Elon. Firing people from their jobs, in some cases people who have worked at their jobs for years, shuttering entire government agencies, because you should not only not empathize with government employees, you also apparently shouldn't empathize with people who benefit from government services, unless those people are billionaires and CEOs like Elon, who benefits tremendously from government contracts and various other relationships with the government. But if you're a poor person, if you're a person who needs welfare benefits, who needs nutrition support, who needs support to pay for your child care, sorry about your luck. If you're an older person who is depending on your Social Security or your Medicare, if you are a low-income person who depends on Medicaid to meet your health needs, apparently we shouldn't care about you, according to Elon, because his Department of Government Efficiency has been vigorously and enthusiastically engaged for the last few months in slashing those agencies, slashing those services. In some cases, in the case of USAID, which had been the agency responsible for the largest amount of foreign aid being paid into the world by the United States, erasing it completely, just utterly destroying it. We shouldn't have any empathy for those people, I guess. Who should we have empathy for? Elon says, even though he says empathy is the fundamental flaw of Western civilization, he also says we should care about other people. Which other people does Elon seem to think we should care about, if not all those people that I just listed who are being directly harmed and threatened by his actions and the actions of this current presidential administration? Who should we care about? Who is deserving of our empathy? Here's the next Elon clip. And again, I apologize, but this is from his recent interview on Fox News Channel with Bret Baier.
My companies are suffering because I'm in the government. You just pointed that out a moment ago.
Right.
Do you think it helps sales if dealerships are being firebombed? Of course not. And Tesla customers are being intimidated all over the country and all over Europe. Mm-hmm. Does that help Tesla? I mean, you had Tim Waltz, who's a huge jerk, running around on stage with the Tesla stock price where the stock price had gone in half, and he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do.
Who should we feel empathy for? Actually, what should we feel empathy for? Elon Musk's companies. Oh, guys, his companies are suffering. His companies, his stock price is dropping. His assets in his company, the value of his stocks has been cut in half. Tim Walz, he goes on stage in front of people and he holds up his phone with the stock price and he gloats about the falling price of Tesla stock. What an evil thing to do. What a jerk, Tim Walz. Doesn't he have any empathy for Elon Musk's companies? You shouldn't have empathy for any of those vulnerable people that are being harmed by what Elon Musk is doing. You should have empathy for Elon Musk's companies and their stock prices falling. And of course, by extension, if you feel bad for the companies, if you extend your empathy to Tesla as a corporate entity, naturally, your empathy should also fall upon its poor, embattled, completely innocent CEO, Elon Musk. When Elon Musk says that even though empathy is the fundamental flaw of our civilization, it's still important and you should still care about other people, the other people he's talking about is him. You should care about him. You should be invested in his welfare. And even though he's still the richest man on the planet, we should be deeply invested and deeply concerned in the fact that the value of his Tesla shares has fallen precipitously in recent weeks. That's who we should feel bad. We should feel bad for the richest man on the planet. I have been saying for years that you can tell a lot about a person and a lot about an individual's broader worldview if you can figure out where their sympathies lie. Where do Elon Musk's sympathies lie? With himself. And apparently, that's it. But he is asking us to extend our sympathies to him, and not to all the people who are being harmed by him and by the policies that he and the Trump administration are advocating and in some cases carrying out. That tells you a lot about him and the kind of person he is and the kind of person he expects other people to be in his egotism, in his narcissism, because that explains a lot of this. His lack of empathy for other people, his apparent demanding of empathy for himself at the expense of other people. You can explain that by citing his narcissism. You can explain that by citing his egotism, his megalomania, his self-centeredness. You can point out his hypocrisy, not just in the empathy thing, but the fact that he has also claimed in reference to those Tesla protests that those protesters are being paid by the Democratic Party or by big Democratic donors like the right's favorite boogeyman, George Soros, who isn't nearly as rich as Elon Musk, but is apparently a much greater threat to democracy than Elon Musk is. Even though Elon Musk's recent involvement in politics has been far more extensive and far more direct than Soros's has ever been. But you can point out his hypocrisy there. He insists that the only reason why there would be protests that we've been seeing at Tesla dealerships is because the protesters have been paid. That's the only possible explanation for that. But on the other hand, Elon himself has felt the need to go to Wisconsin and literally buy votes to ensure a Republican victory in an election to fill a state Supreme Court seat. But that's okay. He's apparently so popular that the only protesters are the paid ones. But despite that incredible popularity and the popularity of his entire political party and his entire political side, he still needs to go to Wisconsin personally and hand out checks to people to try and boost support for their state Supreme Court candidate. So, but things like that, inconsistencies like that, that tells us a lot. But to me, and I hate to keep beating this drum with Elon, but It really once again comes down to Elon Musk's understanding or misunderstanding of comedy and what makes something funny, and why a lot of people who do have decent senses of humor don't think he's very funny and don't share his comedic sensibilities. I've said before in videos, one of the things that defines Elon Musk, at least as a public person, and I suspect as a private individual as well, is his deep-seated need for other people to think he's funny. He wants people to think he's cool. He wants people to think he's smart. He wants people to think he's a visionary and an innovator and the guy who's going to save the world and save the human race and all of that stuff. But he really, really, really wants people, especially young people, especially cool, hip young people, to think he's funny. And I think maybe in a very narcissistic, self-centered way, he does have a concept of comedy. And related to that, he probably also has a concept, or at least an innate understanding, of tragedy. Because the two concepts are inextricably linked. Tragedy and comedy are opposite ends of the same line. And I think Elon understands that. But he only understands it from his perspective. The problem is, Elon fails to understand or fails to reckon with the fact that the relationship of tragedy and comedy to each other works the same way for all of us from our perspectives as well. We don't take his perspective as our own. We have our own perspective. And I think the relationship between tragedy and comedy has never been better expressed than when it was expressed by the great Mel Brooks, the great comedy film director, the guy who made movies that people like Elon Musk like to say, you could never make that movie today, even though Mel Brooks's movies are still widely beloved and appreciated by people today. People from all across political spectrums, people from all across all walks of life and all backgrounds. But never mind. Mel Brooks, sure, his humor would never work in this politically correct, overly woke world. But anyway, once upon a time, Mel Brooks defined the difference between tragedy and comedy like this. He said, tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. And given his stated attitudes toward empathy and the kinds of people that he believes are undeserving of empathy and the kind of person, meaning himself, who is deserving of empathy, it seems that Elon Musk does have an innate understanding of that concept from his point of view. But like I said, it works the same way from our point of view, just in the other direction. Tragedy for us is when we cut our finger, and comedy for us is when you fall into an open sewer and die. So my question to you, Elon, if you happen to be watching, is this. I know you want to be funny, but how bad do you want it?